Behind me, you can see my Rivian R1T and Ford F-150 Lightning. I just turned them on and put the heat on. I'm going to leave them outside all night with the heat running. In fact, I'm not going to turn them off for exactly 12 hours. I'm doing a side-by-side comparison to see which vehicle has a more efficient heating system and which one you'd fare better in if you were stuck in, stranded on the side of a road during a snowstorm. Now stick around and you'll find out why I'm doing this, and also whether or not electric vehicles are more dangerous to be in if you happen to be stuck on the side of the road in a snowstorm. This video is powered by Qmerit, North America's leading provider of installation services for electric vehicle charging, home energy storage, and other electrification technologies. See how Qmerit is making the energy transition easy for home and business owners by following the link in the description of this video. Before we get going, I want to talk a little bit about why we're doing this here today. Now, electric vehicles, like any type of vehicle, have their own sets of advantages and disadvantages. People that, well, let's say, aren't as enthusiastic about our inevitable transition to electric vehicles love to point out the things that they view are disadvantages. And many of those things are legitimate. I mean, for instance, today's electric pickup trucks don't tow as well as combustion pickup trucks can, particularly long distance towing. And if somebody who's an electric vehicle enthusiast tries to refute that, they're just being unrealistic. But there's also a good deal of misinformation coming from people that don't have any electric vehicle experience. One of the things that I've seen repeatedly in the 14 years I've been driving EVs is, good luck with these EVs when there's a power outage. And that's a timely topic because right now there's tens of thousands of people in Michigan without power due to a storm that passed through the state a few days ago. And that reminds me of 2012, when Hurricane Sandy passed through the Northeast. 65% of the people in the state of New Jersey where I live lost power. Some of them lost it for up to 3 weeks. We lost power at my house for more than 2 weeks. I think it was either 15 or 16 consecutive days where there was no power in our area. Now, I have a natural gas generator that I installed just a couple of years before that. So we were fine. I had power through the whole event and I could charge my electric vehicle without a problem. But the storm also knocked out a couple oil refineries that we have here in New Jersey that are critical refineries for the Northeast. So we had a combination of no gasoline being refined and most of the gas stations had no power. So even the stations that had gasoline in their tanks couldn't pump it out. That created a tremendous gasoline shortage. There were lines blocks long for the few stations that were open and actually pumping gas. You couldn't buy gas. People were waiting 7, 8, 9, 10 hours all day long. They'd show up at 4 in the morning and they'd finally get to the pump at like 6 in the afternoon. Police had to come and do crowd control at the gas stations. It was crazy. But I had no problem because I could charge my EV at home from my natural gas generator. My mom's house, coincidentally, didn't lose power. It's just weird how the grid works because all around her, there were power outages. And also at the time, I owned a restaurant in Montclair, New Jersey, and almost the entire city of Montclair had no power, but the block that my restaurant was on had power. It's really weird how the grid works. So I was able to charge at home, I could go to my parents' house, and I was charging at work. So I had no problem charging my EVs. And I remember the other people that I knew at the time that had EVs also had no problems, because the thing about power outages, even when there's power outages, there's always pockets of grid that's functioning, and you can go to public chargers there, or you have a friend that lives there, or you have a natural gas generator like I have. So you can charge your electric vehicle during power outages just fine. And I was having such an easy time with it. The New York Times actually ran a story on me and other local people that had electric vehicles, and it talked about how we had no problem during this massive power outage that lasted weeks in northern New Jersey while people couldn't drive their cars. They were just parked on the side of the road because they couldn't get gasoline. So, the whole thing about power outages and charging your EVs, The people that don't own EVs are the ones that are really worried about that. The people that have EVs know they'll always be able to find a place to plug in. It's really not a problem. Which brings me to why I'm doing the test here today. Another common rallying cry for the people that are, let's say, not very enthusiastic about electric vehicles is they always blurt out, well, what happens if you're stuck in a snowstorm on the side of the road? You know, the battery's going to die and you'll die because you won't be able to be warm during the whole power outage. Now, I'm not going to spend a lot of time disproving that right here because other people have. There's plenty of videos out there online that prove that electric vehicle battery can last just as long. The heaters are very efficient. You'll do the smart thing and not have the heat blasted to 85 degrees. You'll obviously lower it down. You can even turn the heat on for a half an hour, let the cabin get nice and warm, then turn it off for a little while. As a matter of fact, AAA recommends you do that even if you have a gasoline car, because gasoline vehicles can run out of fuel also. It doesn't guarantee that you're gonna get stranded on the side of the road right after you filled up your tank. I mean, you could be on 1/8 of a tank of gas or 1/4 of a tank of gas, and you're only gonna be good for 5 or 6 hours anyway. So really depends on how full your tank is or how full your battery is. And the thing about EVs are, people are much more inclined to charge them daily because you can charge them at home. You plug in every morning, you leave for work. If you've got a full battery, you don't fill up your gas tank every day. So you're much more likely to actually have more energy in your battery than you would in a gas tank. But as I said, I'm not really going to disprove that. There's plenty of other videos online here on YouTube that have talked about that. Alex on Autos actually did a nice video on that last year and kind of explained why you'll be just fine in a electric vehicle if you do get stranded on the side of the road. Now, speaking of which, AAA says that they get about 100,000 calls every winter from people that need to be extracted from their vehicle because it's stuck in a snowstorm somewhere in an unsafe situation, so they get calls to come and rescue them. Now, many times they can't get to them because the road is just impassable. But you think 100,000 people, well, that's a lot. The fact of the matter is there's 230 million licensed drivers in the US, and collectively we drive 3.2 trillion miles a year. So while 100,000 is no small number, it's actually an incredibly small percentage. And the odds of you being stuck on the side of a road in a snowstorm are minuscule. But it does happen. And will you be okay? Well, it really depends on how full your battery is or your gas tank, as I mentioned earlier. And I'm doing a test here with my F-150 Lightning and Rivian R1T to see how much of the battery will drain with 12 hours of just sitting outside in the cold, in the snow, with the heater on. Now I have the heater set to 65 degrees in both vehicles and the fan setting on 1 because that's going to keep the cabin warm enough for you to be fine. Now you're going to be toasty warm. No, you're not going to be toasty warm, but you'll be warm enough. If it is the winter, I'm sure you have a coat or something warm just to get in and out of your vehicle. So you've got your coat on, you've got the heater set at 65 degrees. We're going to see how much of the battery gets exhausted in 12 hours, both vehicles in the same condition. They're outside now running for about an hour. I'm going to check up on them in the middle of the night, and then we're going to see tomorrow morning where we're at after 12 hours, and we'll analyze exactly how much energy they used, and then talk about how long they could go if you were stuck on the side of the road. But first, don't forget, please, if it's your first time here at State of Charge, hit that subscribe button, give me a like on this video, all that good stuff so you don't miss any upcoming content here on State of Charge. All right, it's about 2:30 in the morning, halfway through the test. I started the cars at around 8:30 last night, so it's been about 6 hours, and it seems like it's stopped snowing now. It's kind of more like a freezing rain than anything. Let's take a look at the vehicles and see if the passengers are okay. The hypothetical stranded passengers, that is. All right, let's go in the Rivian first. Okay, let me turn it around. Okay, I had to put weight on the seat because the Rivian would shut off if I didn't put the seatbelt on and fake it out so it would think someone was in here. Let's check the temperature. Well, you can see here, it looks like it's about 52 degrees Fahrenheit in here. Is the heat still running? Yeah, inside the heaters there, you can see it says 72 it's coming out at, and we are at 76% state of charge. I want to make sure we can see that here. Right here. Yeah, 76% state of charge. So started out at 85% state of charge and we're down to 76. Now let's take a look at the Lightning. All right, open her up in here, and it is 56 degrees, so it's nice and warm in here. You'd be fine if you were stranded. Let's take a look at the state of charge. I'm going to toggle over here to the COM screen because that gives us our state of charge. 78% state of charge. So the Lightning's doing a little better. We only lost 7% state of charge in 6 hours of maintaining a nice, comfortable, let's see, 58 degrees now, 56. Depends where you hit. The back seats are 55. So it's definitely warm enough inside here. It's not, you know, crazy toasty warm, but as I said, if you were stranded somewhere and you were just trying to stay warm until, you know, emergency services came, 56 degrees is totally fine. I mean, you'd probably, if you thought it was going to be a really long one, you'd turn everything on and then they get nice and warmed up, then shut the heat off for a half an hour, then turn it back on. You can make it last a lot longer, but this was just turn the heat on, let it run, and see how much we lose in 12 hours. So we'll check back in the morning after this has been going on for 12 hours. We'll see how much energy we've used. We'll calculate it all out. We'll compare the two. Right now, the Lightning's doing a little bit better than the Rivian, but neither one of them's really lost a lot in 6 hours. So looks like you'd be able to be stranded for quite some time, depending on the battery state of charge. Now, if you're running really low and you're only on 20% state of charge, well, then you're going to have that problem if you only have 20% of your gas in the tank. But this just goes to show that the running the heat in the vehicles really doesn't use too much energy, and you could actually be stuck stranded for quite some time and still be fine with the heat. Okay, we'll check back in the morning. We'll see how the vehicles have done once they've been running for 12 hours straight. Well, it's morning, and these guys have been out here now for 12 hours with the heat running all night through the storm. Now, it wasn't as bad as they were predicting. Originally, we were supposed to get 8 or 9 inches of snow. Looks like we got somewhere around 4 or 5 inches, and then it turned over to a mixture of rain and sleet and even hail. So that actually lowered the amount of snowfall because, well, it doesn't lower the amount of snowfall, but it's not as deep as it was last night because the snow has settled down. It's just like a real thick, heavy, wet snow now, and there's only probably 4 inches on the ground. But that really doesn't affect what we're doing inside the truck. It's been pretty steady temperature-wise. It's not a super cold storm. It came in, it was right around 28, 29 degrees when it started snowing. Right now it's like 31, 32 degrees. So it warmed up a couple degrees, and that's why it switched over to a freezing rain. So let's go inside the vehicles now and get the data from each vehicle, and then we'll analyze the results and see how long it would last if you really were stuck somewhere on the side of the road, depending on how much battery you had. We'll talk about if you're at 50% state of charge, 75% state of charge, all that, because obviously you can't plan this, and your state of charge is going to be what it is when you get stuck on the side of the road. All right, let's hop in the vehicles now and see how much energy they consumed over the last 12 hours. Okay, let's hop into the Rivian and see how she did. Alrighty. what do we have here? So that's interesting. It's saying the duration of this trip was 0 hours and 7 minutes, but we know it was 12 hours. At least it does have the total energy. So we used 21.7 kilowatt hour. And let's see what the state of charge is. Well, over here, it shows the state of charge is 66%, and we have 192 miles of estimated range. Let me come over here and go to energy. 66% state of charge, 192 miles of estimated range, and that's based on all-purpose driving mode. Okay, come back over here. Interesting, it says the last 15 minutes of driving, we averaged 1.61 miles per kilowatt hour. I guess you have to be moving. I would think that that did it just when the vehicle was turned on, but I guess not. You know, and I've noticed odd things with the Rivian's trip data. It seems like every now and then it doesn't work exactly as it's supposed to. And as you can see from the trip summary that we looked at before, it's not always 100% accurate. You see here, still saying 0 hours, 7 minutes. The vehicle's been turned on for 12 hours now. So anyway, the important figures are here. 21.8 kilowatt hour of energy has been consumed in the last 12 hours while the vehicle's been sitting out here and the heat's running. And we're at 66% state of charge, and we started at 85% state of charge. Oh, one last thing I forgot to do was test temperature. It shows here 52, 51. And plus I've had the door open for a little while now. So the temperature is pretty much on par with the Lightnings. I think it was a little bit cooler in here. And that's part of the reason why yesterday I noticed when I originally turned both of the temperatures on both vehicles to 65 degrees. What I noticed was the Rivian was much colder than the Lightning. So what I did was I increased this up to 67 degrees and I lowered the Lightnings to 62 degrees. And in doing so, it got the interior temperature just about the same temperature, somewhere right in the mid 50s, 52 to 55, 56 degrees, which is more than comfortable enough. If you're sitting in your vehicle stranded, that's plenty warm to keep you safe until emergency services arrives or you can get out. All right, let's hop in the Lightning. Okay, vehicle is on. Let's see what the temperature is here. Oh, no, wait. Yeah. It's 57, 58 degrees, pretty much what it was last night when I checked at 2:30 in the morning. Let me sit in here. Okay, so we're at 71% state of charge. Again, as I said, we started at 85% state of charge 12 hours ago. Now let me take a look at the trip energy. Okay, so as you can see here, 12 hours and 4 minutes we've been on, and 0% of our energy went to driving. It shows here climate use and accessories. So that's pretty much just for the heater, and also the center display was on. You could turn that off, but that's really not using any energy. That's pretty much just to run the climate control system. So there we go. 71% state of charge, and it says I can still drive 200 miles at 71% state of charge. So, you know, even after 12 hours of sitting in a snowstorm somewhere, if I was stranded, if I were to start at 85% state of charge, which is reasonable because let's say you were driving to work and you charged fully the night before, you would get there and, you know, depending on how far you live from your job, it's not unreasonable to be stuck with 85% state of charge. And you'd still have 200 miles of driving range after sitting in your vehicle for 12 hours. All right, let's go inside and crunch the numbers. Okay, so you saw from the Rivian's in-vehicle display, it was showing that the vehicle had consumed 21.7 kilowatt hour. Then it turned to 21.8 kilowatt hour while I was doing that recording. during that 12 hours. Now, we didn't get that information in the Lightning because the Lightning doesn't show that information. It doesn't show you how much energy is consumed by the vehicle. It's one of my biggest gripes about the Lightning. It doesn't have very good statistics inside of the vehicle. It doesn't show you things like even your kilowatt draw when you're DC fast charging. You don't really know what it is. You have to rely on the charging station to show you how much power it's delivering to the vehicle. It's one of the things I think Ford could greatly improve was the information the vehicle gives the owners. So I figured the best way for me to try to figure out how much energy it consumed was to plug it back in and immediately charge it back up. So I did that with both vehicles. Now the Rivian had said that it had consumed 21.8 kilowatt hour. When I fully charged it, when I fully charged it back up to 85%, that was the starting point. The in-vehicle display showed that the vehicle had taken in 23.6 kilowatt hour in that charging session. And that lines up just fine because you got to figure there's about an 8% charging losses. And that's what I've been observing with my Rivian. So if you do the math there, that works out fine. Now with the Lightning, while you don't get that information in the vehicle, you do get it in the Ford Pass app. And my Ford Pass app showed that the vehicle had taken in 20 kilowatt hour. Now the Lightning charges a little bit more efficiently than my Rivian does. I noticed both on DC fast and AC charging, there's less charging losses. It's a pretty efficient vehicle. So I figured out that 20 kilowatt hour, I probably took in somewhere around 18.5, 18.6 kilowatt hour to the battery. And again, that lines up perfectly with the 14% of the battery we used in this test compared to the Lightning's 131 kilowatt hour battery pack. Okay, so now let's take a look at this test by the numbers. All right, so as I said, I ran the vehicles for 12 consecutive hours. The ambient temperatures were 28 degrees to 32 degrees, and we started at 85% state of charge. The Rivian R1T's battery pack has a usable capacity of about 128 kilowatt hour, and the Lightning's is 131 kilowatt hour. Now, the R1T's ending state of charge was 66%, and the Lightning's was 71%. So we used 19% of the R1T's battery and only 14% of the Lightning's battery. When we recharged both vehicles, the Rivian R1T took in 23.6 kilowatt hour and the Lightning took in a total of 20 kilowatt hour. But that's with both vehicles starting at 85% state of charge. Chances are you're not going to get stranded at exactly 85% state of charge. And quite honestly, it's impossible to really guess what your state of charge would be. Best practice, I guess, would be if you know it's going to snow badly the next day, charge up to 100% the night before. Even if you typically only charge to 80 or 85%, on days that you're going to go on long trips or you think you might need extra energy, it's totally fine to charge your EV to 100%. You just don't want to do that every single day. So now let's take a look at how long the batteries would last at different starting points. Okay, so first we're going to talk about starting at 100% state of charge. Let's say it was a perfect world and you had just pulled out of a DC fast charger, you're at 100%, the storm hit and you got stuck. Okay, the Rivian will last 63 hours. That's 2 days and 15 hours. The Lightning, 85 and a half hours. And I did round up and down on these to the nearest half an hour. That's 3 days, 13 and a half hours. At 75% state of charge, the R1T would last 47 hours. That's 1 day and 23 hours, nearly 2 full days. And the Lightning, 64 hours, 2 days and 16 hours. 50%, you got half your battery. The R1T would last 31 and a half hours. That's 1 full day and 7.5 hours. And the Lightning would last 43 hours. You notice nearly the same length of time that the Rivian lasted with 75% state of charge. And that turns out to be 1 day and 19 hours. And at 25% state of charge, the R1T would still last 15 and a half hours, and the Lightning would last nearly an entire day with only 25% of its battery. And again, as I said a few times, if you really were stuck and stranded, you would turn the vehicle on, turn the vehicle off, and it would make it last much longer by conserving your energy that way. So the Lightning proved to be a more efficient vehicle in this test, and it can run longer with less power in the battery. But it's not completely the Rivian's heating system that's to blame here, because the Rivian has what's known as vampire drains. Now, vampire drains are passive battery drains when the vehicle's turned off. So even when the vehicle is off, the systems are operating and it's draining the battery. I've noticed with my R1T, I lose about 1 to 1.5% of battery in 24 hours when the vehicles just sit and parked outside. So if you do the math, 12 hours is half of a day. So you figure, let's say 1% battery, I'm rounding it up a little bit. With a 128 kilowatt hour battery, you're looking at somewhere around 1 kilowatt hour of energy that we lost just to these vampire drains that didn't go to the heating system. But even if you remove that, the Lightning still used less energy in that 12-hour period. And quite honestly, if you're stuck on the side of the road, you don't care where your energy is going, whether it's the heating system or some unknown vampire drain. You just want to know, is this battery going to last until somebody gets here and helps me? And I think this proved that if you're in a Ford F-150 Lightning with the extended range battery pack, because the Lightning also comes with a smaller battery pack, but if you had an extended range battery pack like I had, you'd be in better shape in the Lightning than you would with a Rivian at similar states of charge. Well, as you can see here, you'll be fine if you're in an EV and you're stuck on the side of a road during a snowstorm, provided the battery is at a relatively decent state of charge. But that goes for combustion vehicles too. You can't be stuck on the side of the road with 1/8 of a tank. It's probably going to run out in a few hours. So really depends on being prepared. And one of the good practices, I guess, would be if you know you're going to be driving in a snowstorm the following day, charge your EV, whatever EV it is, up to 100% the night before, even if that's not your daily routine. Many EVs recommend that you only charge them to about 80 or 85% for daily driving. And when you go on a road trip and you need the extra range, then charge it to 100%. But maybe you should also add, if you're going to be in an area where you're expecting a pretty bad snowstorm, it can't hurt the night before to charge it to 100%. It won't hurt the battery if you do that every now and then. So that's probably best practices for EVs. Now, I also want to point out a couple of things. When I did this test, it wasn't quite as cold as I was hoping it to be. I was hoping this would be a snowstorm and the temperatures would be down in the teens or in the low 20s. As I mentioned, it got down to about 28 degrees and then warmed up to about 31, 32 degrees during this test, which is cold enough to snow, but it's not really bitter cold. Unfortunately, it's been a really mild winter here in New Jersey. I was hoping to do it when it was colder. I was hoping to do it in a snowstorm where we got like a foot of snow. This was the first snowstorm we had in New Jersey, and it's March, which is crazy. We usually have multiple storms over the winter and get about 40 inches of snow here in northern New Jersey. We've only had 8 this whole winter. So this was my first opportunity. It's probably going to be my last because it's already mid-March at this point. So what I would say is, if it was much colder, would probably use a little bit more energy, both vehicles would, to keep the cabin warm. So you have to factor that in. But as I said earlier, I think multiple times, you probably also wouldn't just leave the heat running continuously like I did. You'd let it run for a little while, turn it off, let it run, get that energy to last as long as it possibly could. So that would probably offset the extra energy needed to warm it up from a lower starting point. And you'd probably still get about this long as I displayed here in this video with the batteries at those certain states of charge. And there's one last thing I want to point out. AAA also recommends, if you are stuck on the side of the road in a snowstorm waiting for emergency services, every hour or so, and it's continuing to snow, let's say you're in a real blizzard, every hour or so you should go out and clear out the snow away from your tailpipe. If you don't do that, the deadly gases can back up into the vehicle and it could kill you. So, hey, with an EV, you don't have to worry about that. You can stay in your vehicle. You don't have to get out and be cold every hour and make sure that the tailpipe fumes aren't backing up into the vehicle. So that's another reason to like EVs. But if you are driving a combustion vehicle and this, the slim chance this happens to you, does happen to you, make sure you keep your tailpipe clear because that can be a disaster in itself. Listen, if this is your first time here at State of Charge, please don't forget, smash that subscribe button so you don't miss any upcoming electric vehicle news and reviews. And as always, thanks for watching.